human beings are dreamers, but at some point we get that beaten out of us or ironed out of us, like it's a wrinkle in a fabric. It's we don't want it there, but people have to be given permission to dream again, and that's the beauty of my job is giving
Yeah.
people the opportunity to dream.
Financial independence.
Freedom.
Financial picture.
Independent financially.
Financial future.
Financial freedom and wealth.
Financial independence.
Get your fill. Financial independence and long life. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals. And people come on to help us who are generally really cool and nice and awesome. And that's why I'm very excited that Chad Hufford is with us today. He is in Anchorage, Alaska, which I think is cool. He was born and raised there. He's a best-selling author, an entrepreneur, and a financial advisor with 17 years of experience in owning and running a financial planning firm called Veritas Wealth Management that manages roughly $500 million in assets, which is pretty cool. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Christine. It's a pleasure being here. And you are right when you said Alaska is pretty cool up in Anchorage, Alaska. It's quite cool today. It was 30 degrees on my
Some
drive
might
in
say
this morning.
cold.
Yes, yes, but that's okay. It's a beautiful morning. It's going to be crisp and clear today.
Yes, we could spend a whole episode talking about Alaska. I've only been there once, but I just absolutely loved it. Of course, it was July at the time, so it's probably a little different there in July.
Yes, no, it is a wonderful place. And I love the focus you have on independence on with this show because I think Alaska, there's a tendency to attract that type of people who value independence and autonomy more. I mean, you don't typically move to Alaska because you want the certainty and then the predictability of everyday life. It definitely attracts a certain individual, and yeah, it's a great place to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you'd always lived there, do you feel like you can objectively view, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you take certain things for granted, like, oh, isn't everybody like this? But do you feel like you've been away enough to really appreciate that?
So there's no such thing as a perfectly objective view, which is, I mean, something we get into in our financial planning all the time. Like everybody has biases towards certain things, and you can't always change those biases, but sometimes you can recognize those and account for them. I mean, I've been out a lot. I've never lived anywhere else for an extended period of time, but yes, I am biased towards Alaska, both some of the good and the bad. We have here in Anchorage, it isn't particularly harsh winters, and we do get below zero and things like that. But honestly, in Midwest and in New York, with the humidity and the wind, they have, I think, harsher weather than we do. It just doesn't last for 6 months. So it's really I think the length of it. But no, there are also things that I try to remind myself and my kids, we don't want to take this for granted. Like last night we saw two moose coming home from picking my kids up at youth group. And I mean, you think about like this is an 800-pound animal that's just like walking through your neighborhood. And and we had just a beautiful, beautiful sunset last night. And there's a whole mountain range that is honestly like hundreds of miles long, out kind of the south of us, and we're watching the sunset behind them, and it just lights up it just things you don't get to see a lot of other places. My dad is from Iowa. It was like, okay, there's a cornfield and there's another cornfield, and like you don't always get this other places. So I think it's a reminder to not take for granted those things that, as you said, you've been up here once. For a lot of people, coming to Alaska is a bucket list trip, and we live here, so we cannot afford to take that for granted.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I just want to say one thing before we get into the real meat of talking about your business is like being there in July because you have so much sunlight, the flowers, like a flower that I recognize that's this big and you know, in Anchorage, it's like gigantic. And you think, wow, it was very surreal. Another thing that was surreal is one place I stayed at this bed and breakfast, and I looked over and this guy next door had a flat roof and there was a snowblower on the roof. I was like, okay, it's not always beautiful and sunny like this.
Well, so last winter we had a record snowfall, which when you're in Alaska, record snowfall means something. When you're in
Right.
Texas, that might be like we had 3 inches,
Yeah.
but we also, where I live, kind of on the outskirts of Anchorage, we usually get a lot of wind, but we didn't this year. So a lot of times the wind kind of takes care of the snow load. Like
Right.
it'll build up for a couple months, then we have a nice windstorm and it takes all the snow off, maybe a few shingles. But we didn't, and it just built up, built up. We had some major buildings collapse last year, and there were companies that made a lot of money, excuse me, that did exactly what you said, and they would show up and shovel people's roofs, and it was something that a lot of folks didn't have to realize, but last winter it was a regular thing seeing people out shoveling or snow blowing the roof.
Yeah. So very cool. And it made an impression on me. It's a fabulous place, fabulous place. If you get a chance, go to Anchorage. And while you're there, talk to Chad.
Yeah,
Chad, what
exactly.
kind of things would people talk to you about when they come visit you in Anchorage?
Well, from a business standpoint, I would say one of the biggest questions, or probably the most common question I get is, how do I know if I'm on track for retirement? Um, and and I guess parallel question to that for people that have already retired is, when will I run out of money? Will
Yeah.
I
How
outlive
long
my
can I
money?
afford to live?
Yep. Yep. When do I have to die to make my financial plan
Right.
work?
Exactly.
And I love what you had a guest on recently that talked about, it's not retirement, it's graduating. And we talk about that same idea of a job optional lifestyle. Like for the types of folks that we work with, Christina, for a lot of folks that listen to your show, 20 years of Saturdays should not be the goal. Like that wouldn't even be good for them, because the people that listen to your show, they're more focused, they're more goal oriented, they're more ambitious. They're the worst types of people to have 2 decades of vacation. And
Absolutely.
don't get me wrong, I love vacation. We just planned a trip to Hawaii, which right now at 30 degrees here in Anchorage sounds really good. But those things should still punctuate your financial independence.
Yeah.
They shouldn't define it. And I love what he talked about, with the idea that and I believe this, your biggest years of impact are after you no longer need your job, because you don't have the stress, the bureaucracy, and maybe you stay at your job, but you're able to work your job differently, because if they're asking you to do something that doesn't align with your values, you don't have to come back on Monday.
Right.
And if Timmy from HR is bugging you, like whatever, if you don't want to see him, you don't have to. And the stress, even if you stay in that job, the stress rolls off your back. So when people do ask those questions about, am I on track for retirement, or how do we even find out? We obviously help them try to answer that question, but we also try to ask a bigger question, which is around that topic of, well, what are you retiring to? Like, what would your life look like if
Exactly.
you never needed a paycheck ever again? It's such a fun conversation to have.
Absolutely true. And that's when you can say, "Oh, I've always wanted to do X," and you can
Hmm.
actually do it. And that, like you say, that's when you have your impact. That's when you really come to life, and it can be your best, most fun, most amazing time. But I feel like, and correct me if it feels to me like when the people have retirement as this thing, this ethereal cloud that they have to race toward, but they really don't know what that means. What does it look like? What is retirement, right? And you think, oh, I'm going to be able to go fishing and play more golf. Like, oh my God, I'd shoot myself after 2 months of just being right. I mean, that's me, right? But I think a lot of people are like that, where you just get kind of depressed and think, wow, this is what I've been working my whole life toward, and it's really not that interesting.
There's People lose a sense of significance and
Yes.
relevance. People get lonely, especially men, but women too. Men are just, I think, worse at being intentional and finding those connections. But here's the other thing too: like if you're independently wealthy, there's almost a guilt or shame to express that, man, things aren't working in my life. Because people can look at you like, you golf whenever you want, you go on vacation whenever you want, you have all this money, you have nothing to complain about. But if people lose their sense of purpose, then everything else starts crumbling. And we try to remind people that Financial independence is about pursuit. It's about pursuing a more meaningful life. It's not running away from your job or fleeing your career. And a lot of people, to your point, Christine, that's almost how they view it is, oh man, someday I'm just going to get to quit my job. Well, you know what? And this is not advice, but if all you want to do is quit your job, you can do that today and the government will take care of you.
True.
Again, not advice. I'm not promoting that at all. But if that's all you want, is just to be able to quit your job. That goal is not big enough. But if your pursuit of financial dependence is to have meaningful purpose at a level you've never had before, that just raises the stakes on the whole thing. And there's a world of difference between somebody who is running from a career and who is retiring to something, who's chasing and pursuing a better life and in a different life, a life where they have autonomy and freedom to do what matters most. And yeah, there might be some golf and some vacations in there, but I think we have to raise the stakes on what that looks like.
And so that then the big question becomes when someone comes to you and they're like, okay, here's all my stuff. How do you go beyond the worrisome questions that they have and help them to imagine a new reality where they don't have to get up and go to some place they don't enjoy anymore? They can basically do whatever they want that is not necessarily just golfing and, joining a book club. Not that there's anything
Well,
wrong with that.
I do read a lot of books, so that hurt a little bit on the book club comment. No, I'm kidding. Um, no, I have a specific chapter in my book while we're talking about books, Forging Financial Freedom, that financial independence is not a finish line. And a lot of people treat it like that, where
Yeah.
you sacrifice all these things and you cross this finish line. And there's a very tangible, heartfelt story in there about Olympic athlete I worked with. And he talked about winning a gold medal and how empty he felt the next morning, realizing that if he sacrificed all the relationships, so much of his time, grueling workouts at best in 4 years, possibly if everything went perfect, he might be back to where he was the day before.
Yeah.
And there's a tendency for people to feel that like this is what I sacrificed so hard for. And I think this is why we have to raise the stakes, Christine, because it does take sacrifice. I don't care if it's real estate, if it's you're using mutual funds and traditional 401ks, but it is a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of intentionality. It takes work. It's painful at times. It's frustrating. And if we don't have something more compelling than just a finish line, it's too easy to give up. So one of the things that we do to answer your question is asking very specifically, what are the elements of your life that you would like to see grow, that you would like to see more of if you didn't have to go back to work? What are the elements of your life that you would like to diminish or maybe eliminate completely? And it's almost we give them permission to dream and we force them or at least ask them nicely but
Firmly.
encouraging strongly um essentially it's like, Christine, paint me a picture of what you would want your life to look like. And think of it like designing a house. um it isn't going to look exactly like the way you started it, but you want to have intentionality with how you're going to design what this house is going to look like, and you're going to want to design and architect what you want your future to look like. And then we reverse engineer that. Okay, here's kind of a rendering of what we think we want in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Then we reverse engineer that with a blueprint that connects our future goal with our actions today. So now we don't have just this ethereal goal in the future. It's connected to the present with a blueprint, or you can think of it as a roadmap that connects my actions, my behaviors, my choices today with where I want to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And it's almost like bringing the future into the present. It's such a powerful thing when people realize I don't have to worry about accomplishing all this stuff right now. I want to pay off my house. I want to do this. I want to save X amount of dollars. We think it's important for people to have a very specific target for
Mhm.
the amount of money that they will need invested, the amount of capital that they will need to retire comfortably, but they don't have to get at that all today. It might just be as simple as this week, this month, I need to save an extra X amount of dollars or pay down this chunk of real estate X amount of dollars. So it breaks that long-term goal into bite-sized chunks, and they can start connecting with the future versions of themselves by imagining what life would look like if I never had to collect a paycheck ever again. And again, that's what makes this job so fun is you can see people's eyes light up. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit long-winded with this, but I've got 6 kids, and I've got like a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. My 4-year-old just explained to me the other day, he's like, Dad, I don't know if I want to have a motorcycle or a Lamborghini when I'm older. So I'm just gonna have both. And
Love
like
that.
he's a dreamer.
Yeah.
Human beings are dreamers, but at some point we get that beaten out of us or ironed out of us. Like it's a wrinkle in a fabric. It's we don't want it there. But people have to be given permission to dream again. And that's the beauty of my job is giving
Yeah.
people the opportunity to dream and become like a little kid. We might not be able to do everything you ever wanted, but you might be able to do a lot of it. And seeing that happen in somebody who's 45, 50, 55 years old, 65 years old, and stirring up those dreams inside of them again, it's a wonderful process.
Fantastic. And it's a fun job too, to
It
be that
is.
person. What who is sort of your like, do you have an avatar, sort of an ideal client, like maybe their age and their like who they are, like somebody who you really just love working with and who is just like, yes, I've caught you at exactly the right moment and we're gonna be able to change your life right now.
Well, we work with a lot of people who come through Dave Ramsey's organization. I don't work for Dave, but we are affiliated. We cooperate. So a lot of those folks resonate with us, and vice versa. I think one of the biggest things, or biggest demographics, are blue collar millionaires. And we have executives, and we have surgeons and other medical professionals and attorneys and things like that. But a lot of the people we work with actually come out of the trades, the blue collar industries. We have a lot of firefighters, a lot of law enforcement. Here in Alaska, of course, there's a ton of oil field workers.
Yeah.
We have oil field workers actually across the United States. A lot of those people only work up here for 2, 3 weeks at a time. Then they get a couple weeks off. They go back to their nice warm place in Arizona or Texas. Um, but there's the trades, welders, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, like there's a lot up here. And again, I think there's something about the trades. They're willing to do the mundane things with excellence. And that's what financial independence requires. It's
Yeah.
it's boring. It's being able to master the boring, master the mundane. So those are some of our favorite people to work with because they already know how to do the tasks that aren't flashy, sexy, or exciting and do them very, very well with consistency. And that's what it really takes. You know this, Christine. It isn't it isn't the flashy, one day you pick this great stock or this beautiful shining piece of real estate falls down from the sky, and it's the relatively simple but difficult things that we chip away at every single day. So yeah, blue collar millionaires. We love working with them. They are more likely to have that grit and determination, the character qualities and the mindsets necessary to build lasting financial independence and to actually do the work to get to where they say they want to do, or say,
Yeah.
to do the work to get to where they say they want to be. I mean,
Right. Well, one good thing that I know about, friends who I have that are in the trades and stuff too, is that they're sort of really motivated because they recognize that they do not want to be doing that work when they're 70 years old. Whereas somebody working in an office might say, well, I've got this great, thing and I can just keep doing it. They're like, no, my body does not want to be doing this work at that age. So they've got that additional maybe motivation that someone with a cushy job might not have, right?
you're absolutely right. And so just to level that up a little bit, like with our oil field workers, they are a lot of these guys are working, guys and gals working up on the North Slope. It's above the Arctic Circle. I mean, this is like north of Santa Claus. And it gets there's places where the sun almost doesn't rise for a few weeks in a row. 40, 50 below, that's ambient, no wind chill. and you're away from your family for 2 or 3 weeks. So just think about it. You do a 30-year career, 15 years, because they're usually 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. 15 years of that is spent away from your family. You're missing birthdays, anniversaries, recitals, basketball games. And yeah, they some of those guys and gals, they love their work, but like I don't want to do this until I'm 65, 70 years old. I've
Oh,
missed
yeah.
so much. So being able to get to that place of financial independence, that job optional lifestyle early, and then maybe they do still continue on with an office job that doesn't pay as much, or maybe they switch careers. We maybe they start their own business. But again, it's getting to that point early in life where they no longer need a paycheck ever again.
And I would think that it's key to kind of understand what that is going to look like, right? Because you can't really tell somebody how much they're going to need if they, if you really don't know what they're going to be doing, right? I mean, if I'm going to say, well, you know what, as soon as I finish this job, I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to need X amount of startup capital and I'm going to expecting to have some number of years where I'm not actually getting a paycheck. And so how can we finance that? How can I know that I'm ready to step away from my 9 to 5 and actually embrace this lifestyle that I've been wanting to have for my whole life?
Well, so Dwight Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, when he was a general, once said that no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
That's right.
That is very true in finances as well. But here's why planning is so important. It keeps you intentional.
Yeah.
You are acting on a plan rather than reacting to this crazy world around you. And what you said, Christine, is exactly right. There's no way that somebody who's 45 years old knows exactly what they're going to need when they're 62. I was with a guy yesterday who is 62, retiring next year at 63, and it's still a little fuzzy because he's never been retired before. He's never had a job optional lifestyle. He doesn't know what his life is going to look like and what hobbies he might do. And one of his hobbies right now is motorcycles. That's probably not a cheap hobby, especially here in Alaska, because you're shipping it out a lot because our season's so short. Anyway, but I kind of compared this to like building a house. I'll just try to give you a quick example of this. So right before COVID, so 2018, my wife and I started building. I'm so grateful we started building in 2018 and not 2020 or 2021.
No kidding.
And I was really, for a few years, we had talked about this, and I did not want to build. And I told my wife, I was like, I don't think I can afford to pay for the build and for all the marriage counseling that we're going to need simultaneously
Right.
while we're trying to do this. So I was like, let's just, we'll find something that's close, and then we can do some renovations and this and that, and like that'll be fine. And she had a very particular list of some things that she wanted, and we're homeschooling our kids, so some things were around having a homeschool room plus all these bedrooms to store all these kids, and it was hard, and she, so we're seeing places that are close, and then she finds this property and she's like, Chad, this it's perfect. And the builder has built homes for a couple of our friends. All we need is this house with a couple things switched and a basement. Like that's all we need. We're gonna use the same flooring, the same countertops, the same doors, the same cabinets, the same tile. Everything is gonna be the same. Just a couple of switches. So I was like, awesome. We're gonna take this model, we're gonna add a basement, do a couple other things, and like our decisions are done. My wife's like, even the same cabinet pulls. This is what I want. I was like, beautiful. So we start our planning based on that. Christine, the only thing that survived that building process was the flooring. Everything else changed. In fact, the floor plan was so different that some of the subcontractors that worked on the model home that we saw didn't even recognize it as they were building our home because so much had changed. Here's the point. Your goals can evolve, and your blueprint then just gets revised as you're building. But even though our blueprint and our end goal changed multiple times, so many times, we always had a plan to keep us on track. We always had a blueprint that showed us here's what we need to be executing right now to keep us on track for what that long-term vision needs to look like. And as that vision shifted, we recalibrated the blueprint. And one of the last big changes we made, and I'll try to make this short and sweet here, but 1 week before we were in the week preceding sending all these plans to the municipality for approval and permitting and all that, both my wife and her twin sister clipped our garage in our old house. Both of them in the same, different spots, of course, because we couldn't hit the same place
Of
twice.
course not.
So I asked my builder, because in the new house we were going to have um, two bays, but one bay was going to be a single door with a tandem spot. So we're, because again, 6 kids, we have to have long cars. Um, but uh, but I was like, can we broaden that and make it wider? So we made the garage door wider a foot by 2 feet, so we'd have extra foot of clearance on either side. Christine, that's some of the best money I've ever spent in my life, just having a little bit wider bay. And nobody's hit the garage in the new house, so it's great. But like all those things were things that we didn't think about when we started building. And as you're planning for your financial independence, there's things you won't think about. And even in retirement, even in financial independence, your financial plan will still change, and that's okay too. When you've lived in a house for 10 years, you're going to remodel, you're going to still change some things.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it's always having a plan to act on so you're not reacting to the crazy world around you.
So how do you help people to not have their goal be that they have to die at a certain age? How can you make that that wealth recurring and rejuvenating so that even if the stock market takes a hit, even if XYZ bad thing happens, that they're still going to be able to live as long as they want to?
As long as they can, right?
Right.
So we've had people ask that very question. In fact, somebody asked me that just a couple days ago. When do I have to die to make my plan work? And we tell
Tomorrow
people,
afternoon would be great.
yeah, nobody should have to die in order for your plan to work. So this works on inheritance too. We've had people come in and say, "Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to save that much. I have a pretty rich uncle." I'm like, "Well, I don't want your Uncle Al to die in order for your financial plan to work. So you shouldn't have to die in order for your plan to work. Christine, I'm sorry to tell you this. You have an expiration date. I do too, but our financial plans don't need to. So I'll just give you another metaphor. Think of this as an orchard. Your wealth is an orchard. If you build up your orchard large enough during your career that you don't need to sell any of the trees, you just live off of the fruit they produce. So that could be an apartment complex, it could be a mutual fund portfolio, but you're just living off of the income. You're not actually selling off what is produced in the income. If you still own the orchard, you're just picking the fruit. A couple things. Number one, it doesn't matter what the trees are worth at any given moment. That's what everybody looks at. What is my net worth today? They open their 401k statement. What is the bottom line? How much are all my mutual funds? How much are all my trees worth if I sell them all today?
Right.
That is not that important. Christine, I don't care about what your net worth is today. What I care about is at a point where you want to have financial independence, what will your income be every month, every year, rising with inflation for the rest of your life? That's the key variable because financial independence is an income issue. It's not a principal problem. So if we can create enough wealth where we can live off of what our wealth creates, the income our wealth produces, your money will outlive you. Because let's be honest, those are really the only two financial outcomes of retirement or financial independence is either you outlive your money, which is terrifying and stressful and burdensome to your friends and family, or your money outlives you. And it's beautiful. You have a legacy and you don't have to worry about dying to make your financial plan work.
Which is the key, right? That's the goal. That's what we all just to be able to live as long as you feel like living and not have to worry like, oh my God, I gotta die. I only got $57 left. That means pretty much tomorrow afternoon. I gotta
Oh,
go.
well, people have told, I mean, this happens relatively regularly. Like we'll run this retirement income plan out for maybe a new client, and we use 100 just as kind of the visual. And they'll be like, well, nobody in my family has lived past 80. Let's just do this to 85. Well, Bill, we could do that, but what if you're 84 and a half and you're not quite dead yet? You might be mostly dead, but if you're not all dead, that's going to be a problem. And I
But
don't
you're
want to
only
have
mostly dead.
Princess Bride, yes. But I don't want to be here having that conversation with you or having a conversation with your wife when you are dead, but she's not. And you guys planned on maybe 20 years of financial independence, and we're sitting at 24 and one or both of you are still around because I am ultimately a fiduciary responsible for you not having to die to make this work. I don't want to apologize to you or your spouse. So let's just run this out indefinitely so you don't have to worry about outliving your money.
And what's sort of the difference in the timeline? Is it just a question of what you're actually investing in, or is it actually that I need to save an extra 5 years so that I can get to that point? Or how does that kind of work?
It's a it's a little bit of both, but a lot of it is what you're investing in. Because a lot of people, as they get closer to retirement, they start shifting into more fixed income investments, whether it's bonds, cash, CDs, whatever. But I don't think anybody would disagree with us, Christine. We live in a rising cost world. Why do people think that they can bring a fixed income and a rising cost retirement and not have problems? That's why, for you guys listening, it's important that you own things. You're not lending to entities. So whether it's mutual funds, we don't do individual stocks. It's just I believe it's too much risk without a commensurate return. But you can own some of the best companies in the world, thousands of them in a mutual fund, and not have the stress of individual stocks. Real estate, you actually own what is producing income and revenue. So painting with a broad brush here, Christine, we have to be owners, not loaners. When when you buy debt or when you buy a bond, it is debt. You're buying a company or a government's debt. When you put your money in a CD, that bank takes that and it turns it into very short-term lending instruments. And so they're loaning out your money and they're saying, well, you can come back and get it in a year or 18 months. But essentially, you are loaning money to a bank or to another entity. In order to create a rising income that we don't have to worry about outliving, we have to be owners, not loaners. Does that help answer that question?
Absolutely does. And you may or may not know, I'm a real estate broker and investor, and I
No, I do
love
know
real
that.
estate.
I
And
know
it's
that.
well, and it's so interesting how so many financial planners don't like to talk about real estate.
I see them as very similar, and I actually see them as complementary. So some of the benefits of real estate that even mutual funds don't have is mutual funds are very liquid, which can be a benefit, but can also get you in trouble. I can't see the value of my real estate coming across a ticker symbol on the bottom of my screen or the bottom of my phone. One of the worst things people can do every day is start their day by looking to see how much their trees have increased or decreased in value. When I say
Right.
trees, I'm
Yeah,
going
we're
back
talking
to my
about the
orchard
orchard. Yeah.
metaphor. Yes.
Yep.
But it's harder to do that. And even if I can do that, even if I know that one of a piece of real estate went down in value 20% last 6 months, it's hard for me to panic and sell that because it takes so long. I'm less likely to make an emotional knee-jerk decision. But
Right.
really, I see real estate and owning companies through mutual funds as they're both equity. You have an equity stake in something. And it's funny that we're talking about this because we actually just closed on an income property um, Monday. So I think that they actually can complement each other very, very well. It's harder to diversify with real estate. Even if you are a multimillionaire, you're likely going to be buying things that are geographically close to you. And ultimately, if we were to be perfectly diversified, we would own not just properties that are in different areas, but we would have commercial property of residential property. Some of that might be storage. You might have some hotels, might have some office. But with mutual funds, you can buy companies that are spread all across the globe to complement the real estate you own. But the real estate provides a different leg to your stool that isn't correlated to your mutual funds. So just think of like 2000. So as we're recording, it's 2024, 2 years ago, 2022. mutual funds went down, stocks, companies all across the globe went down significantly. Small stocks, large stocks across the globe. Real estate went up. That doesn't always happen.
Right.
But another thing that's interesting too is the dividends on those companies. The S&P 500 went down, at one point was down 27% in 2022. What nobody talks about is dividends went up about 11% on the S&P 500. So the value of your trees temporarily went down, but your fruit production, your income went up. And if you owned real estate, that was up too. And you're right. There's people who are so black or white. Like it's got to be mutual funds and stocks and equities, or it's got to be real estate, and they fight each other. And they're both right, but they both have benefits, I should say. And that's one of the things I appreciate about Dave Ramsey is helping people fit both of those together because they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both. Dave Ramsey uses mutual funds to build up capital to buy real estate. So, anyways, that got long-winded. Sorry about that. But no, I love both. I like to own things. So
Awesome. Yeah, me too. And because you can, if I need more money, I'll raise the rent. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously that's simplistic, but there are
but
things you
you're
can do.
but you're right though. I mean, so one of the biggest things that keep people from staying retired or staying financially independent, it isn't the temporary fluctuation of what you own. It's the long-term loss of income due to inflation. It's inflation slowly erodes or eats away at the value of your dollar. But if you own a piece of property, you can gradually raise the rent to stay equal with the cost of living in that area. You have built-in inflation protection.
Right.
Stock-based mutual funds offer some of the same benefits. And man, when you pair those things together, beautiful things start to happen.
Awesome. Awesome. I think so. I could go down a whole like rabbit hole talking about because you brought up Dave Ramsey talking about debt and your thoughts about debt and like I was talking to somebody the other day who was like, oh, I think if we I'm going to sell this thing and I'm gonna pay off my loan. I'm gonna pay off my mortgage. And I'm like, how much is your mortgage? It was 3%. I'm like, so let me get this straight. Rather than investing this money in something that could earn 6%, you're gonna pay off debt that's only costing you 3%. I'm like, does that make sense? I mean, a lot of people now have really low mortgages and they're like, oh, I gotta pay off my mortgage. Like, well, I mean, do you?
I think that can be definitely a sticky subject, especially right now. Like if they're trying to pay off their mortgage now at 3%, but they're planning to sell that house and buy something else,
At
that new mortgage
6%.
might be at 6. Like you got to be careful. Like um, you you've got to look at again, what are your long-term goals?
Yeah,
What is this move going to do for you? But I do think that whether it's a new car or whether it's a piece of real estate or buying a business, when you pay cash, you make better decisions. Now, it doesn't mean you can't make a good decision using debt or leveraging a loan to buy a piece of property or buy a business, something like that. But if you buy $1 million property and write a check for it, that hurts a lot more than putting $100,000 down payment and getting a loan for the rest.
true.
Your due diligence is going to be potentially more intentional. You're going to be more purposeful in your negotiations because every little bit here and there, even a minor repair, you're writing that money is leaving your account.
Yeah,
It's
more
it's
real.
more it's more salient and there's more pain in the purchase, which can be a good thing. So it just even buying like a new car. Um, if you have the cash to pay for it, but you get a zero interest loan, you're like, I can get 4% in my bank on my cash. I'm gonna get this truck. And they want, do you want the super fragilistic whatever sound system? And it's 4 grand. You're like, I don't know if I need that, but 4 grand, it's only $22 a month. Not a big deal. If you're paying cash, you're like, do I really need to listen to my books or my podcasts with with an extra $4,000 stereo? Probably not. So you're going to make better purchasing decisions because you're not thinking of the monthly payment. You're
Right.
actually
You're
paying
thinking
for
of
it in
the
full.
yeah.
So I think if people are using debt, just make sure that debt doesn't allow you to make a a more impulsive or bad decision. We have a lot of people that come in that have just collected investments. They don't really have intention. They don't know their numbers. They've
Yeah.
bought real estate, they've bought some mutual funds, and they haven't been strategically building like we've talked about with a blueprint. They've just been collecting investments. I had a guy come in this summer and he had about $3 million in real estate and about $2 million of debt. So he had about 1.2 million in equity.
Mhm.
And I asked him some of his numbers. He says, "Well, I don't really know all that, but at least they're cash flowing." I'm thinking, you've got seven figures in equity. It better be cash flowing.
Right.
That that shouldn't be your minimum standard. But he had used debt for a lot of these and was kind of willy-nilly about some of the purchases he was making. So Christine, I've listened to you enough to I know you know your numbers. I know you're intentional, but I think for other people, whether using cash or using a loan, just really know what you're buying and run those numbers so you are not just collecting investments.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And it's true. And that's why a lot of times women make better real estate investors than men is because they work the numbers and they're maybe a little bit more nervous. And so they're making sure, like, I interviewed somebody for my book years ago, and she even took the $150 that it cost her to register her corporation every month, if that was amortized across the properties and stuff. Because she said, "Well, I spent that." I'm like, "Yeah, but a lot of people just say, that's nothing." But she's like, "I need to know every cent that this thing's making because if I'm not making money, I don't want to do it."
No, the details matter, especially with a piece of property, because you have so many little nuances that could potentially cost you money. And it might not be, it might be $100 here, a couple $100 there, but they add up. And we were reminded this when we were building. Like every contractor is like, oh, if you just do this little upgrade, it's only $500 and this is only 200. But you have 1,000 decisions that all might cost an extra 50 to $100, whether you're building or buying a property. The details matter, and sometimes the difference between a great buy and a mediocre or even bad purchase can be in the aggregation of all those little seemingly insignificant details. When you put them all together, you're like, wow, I did not see it all like this.
Yeah, that's the death of a thousand paper cuts, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. So, Chad, I love talking to you. We could probably have very long conversation, but we actually already have had a very long conversation. So, it's time for me now to thank you for being here and to ask you if there's anything you wish I would have asked you. I know we have to ask you where we can get your book, but anything else that you wish I would have asked you that we just haven't touched on?
No, we covered a lot of ground, and I know I got a little long-winded in my answers, but I'm passionate about this stuff. I know you are too. It has been a blessing and an honor to be able to talk to you and encourage your audience a little bit. Um, my book you can find on Amazon. It's Forging Financial Freedom. But if you go to forgingfinancialfreedom.com, there's some bonuses to help apply the information in the book because I believe the education, financial education is important, but education without execution is simply entertainment. So we want to make sure that you take the knowledge that Christine and I have talked about, take the information in my book and actually apply it to your life so you get the benefit. So you can also visit us at veritasalaska.com. And we do work with folks all across the country. But we were founded here in Alaska, so we keep it in the website.
Awesome. I love it. And there's nothing, Alaska's a big state. Nothing wrong with bragging about it.
It's got a little cachet to it. It definitely, I mean, you mentioned it early on. It gets people's attention and I am proud of it. So it's
It's awesome.
I might change my tune here in a couple months as we get into
We'll
winter.
talk to you in February and see how
Yeah,
you're feeling.
exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, the other thing I noticed when I was there is, I went to like a, gift shop type place, and there were these like, I don't know, it was like the size of an acorn, and somebody had like carved this really intricate thing onto it. And I thought, yeah, winters are long here. Like,
You got to do something to pass the time.
right.
Yep.
Like, whoa. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciated talking to you, and I'm glad you came. And thank you, listener, for listening. And now think about somebody who you know who would like to have more money, who'd like to retire in a more intelligent way, who doesn't want to have to die on a certain day in order to work with their retirement. And for this episode to them, I bet you could think of at least 5 people who fit that category. For this episode to them, they are going to be so grateful and so happy, and you're going to be a star for the day. And make sure you come next week. See what we have in tap for you then.